I think Bangalore Airport is probably very fortunate in the fact that we serve the city of Bangalore, and we've had exceptional growth over the course of the last few years. And the fact that there's an underlying base of about 1.5 billion people in India, right, with the growth in terms of both the airline traffic as well as the aspiration of the Indian middle class as they get sort of wealthier, has meant that there's been a huge amount of growth at all airports in India in general, and airports like Bangalore in particular, where we've had over 20% growth the last 2 years. So we have the ability or the benefit of having a natural market, and the fact that the population with the aspiration to grow and the growth of the middle class has meant that it's happened anyway. So I think we are in the happy or fortunate position of being able to take advantage of it. When we opened the airport in 2008, the ultimate capacity of the airport was forecast to be about 40 million passengers. In the first 10 years, we hit 27 million passengers. And over the course of the next 10 to 15 years, we will triple again in traffic volumes to be about 85 to 90 million passengers on a 2-runway system. So that's going to be roughly the size of Heathrow. And I often say this and people find it difficult to believe, but in the space of about 25 years, right, from the commissioning of the airport to its ultimate capacity, we're going to be the size of Heathrow, which probably did it over 40 or 50 years. So I think we're very lucky in the sense that there's a strong traffic base. Bangalore also is an exceptional city in terms of having a service industry that's very geared towards travel. We have a middle class that's very aspirational, and we expect to grow to about 3 times what we are today. And in order to meet that demand, we're opening a new runway later this year. In March 2021, the first phase of Terminal 2 goes live, and then almost immediately after that, we have to think of a second phase for Terminal 2. And together, those 2 phases will add another 45 million passengers in terms of overall annual capacity. And then we will have to go back and potentially refurbish Terminal 1. And we've also reserved space for a future Terminal 3 in our master plan. So at the end of the day, we'll probably have 3 terminals, 2 runways, a multimodal transport hub, which will also be operational by 2022 when the metro comes in, and a host of new facilities, better access roads, new access corridors, public transport initiatives and things like that. So I think over the course of the next decade, you're going to see a huge amount of new infrastructure and capacity that we invest in. Most large airports have that problem, the conundrum of, how do you make sure that the operation and level of service is maintained as you deliver all of this capacity and investment in new infrastructure. And I think in our case, it's being orchestrated very carefully. We have the advantage of having been a greenfield airport in the first place, and therefore we have land available in order to deliver these projects. So in very many of these cases, for instance, Terminal 2 is a greenfield site. The new access corridors are all greenfield corridors, so we can provide the additional capacity to come into the airport. The new runway is on a greenfield site, right? So all of these have meant that we've had some natural advantages that we're capitalizing on in terms of making sure that they're not all operational environments. That said, there are huge operational implications because we are a fairly busy, large, operational facility, and in doing so, especially when we think of integrating with the existing facilities like Terminal 1, the existing runway and taxiway and apron system and things like that, there are always challenges from an operational perspective. There are also huge issues with respect to making sure that safety standards are maintained at all times during the delivery of such a large capital program. The interfaces between landside, airside and those boundaries, and general regulatory issues with respect to having and operationalizing multi-runway, multi-terminal environments. I think from a regulatory perspective, there's always going to be a challenge in terms of making sure you have the right financing available, right? In terms of making sure that your equity and debt contributions can be balanced and your debt service obligations can be maintained as you're going through such a large expansion. In an Indian context, I think it's particularly relevant because we also have to match that from a regulatory cycle perspective to the 5-year control periods and make sure that we work very closely with the AERA, which is the Airport Economic Regulatory Authority, to make sure that our charges are stabilized and that we have no cash flow mismatches. And I think that has been the biggest financing issue. The second thing fundamentally has been how do we deliver these experiences by investing in new technology. And I think besides all of the physical infrastructure, we're also investing hugely in new digital platforms. We have 4 or 5 platforms that we're in the midst of rolling out. They're in various stages of operation. We will be doing that over the course of the next 2 years. We've got 19 new digital assets that go live by the end of this year. Some of them are already live. Some of the others will be live by the end of this year. We've also got sort of long-term plans with respect to what we're doing with our networks, with our sort of access points, with better connectivity and things like that. And that's a process that will happen over the course of the next few years. And finally, I think as some of the panelists talked about this morning, cybersecurity is a huge challenge, especially when you have all of this data coming in. And I think over the next few years, a lot of our efforts will also be geared towards making sure that everything that we do has got sort of the right sort of controls in place, and we work with regulatory agencies to make sure that safety, security, and sort of passenger privacy is never compromised.